saves tonight. It's unusual that we have more than one. A lot of them will save, but they don't last more than a few days. And in this case, our first save here, Mr. Sheedy, is doing very well. So I'd like to go over the save, our portion of it, and then Cindy from Centegra will come up and give the hospital end of your save. And then we'll present the save certificates and pins as appropriate to the people that were involved with the first save. And then we'll go on to the second save, which was on August 18th. Unfortunately, the family from the second save isn't able to be here with us tonight. But he is doing well, was released from the hospital on August 21st. So on Wednesday, July 3rd, at 13:43 hours, Twin Lakes Rescue Squad was dispatched for a second call to respond for a 73-year-old male patient that was unconscious and not responsive. While en route to the call, dispatch advised crew that CPR was in progress by family members on scene. Shortly after Twin Lakes officers Kevin Saunders and Ronald Francis arrived on scene, they took over patient care. They attached their department's AED and delivered one shock. CPR was then continued. CPR was initially established by the family members on scene. Mr. Sheedy's wife is a retired nurse and was with him when he arrested. Twin Lakes 6545 arrived on the scene, and EMT IV technicians Andy Hazy and myself, and EMT Ed Combs entered the residence. I removed the police department's AED and attached the ambulance's Phillips MRX to the pulseless patient. CPR was stopped momentarily, and during this assessment period, a carotid pulse was felt. The patient was then log rolled onto a saw stretcher for removal from the residence. The department had recently purchased a device from the Physio Control Corporation known as the Lucas tool. This device is intended for use on patients such as this, and when used properly will do near-perfect chest compressions every time. Unfortunately, as this was the second call in a matter of a few minutes, the Lucas tool was on the first ambulance out. Fortunately, Twin Lakes Fire Chief Stan Klaus Jr. and Assistant Chief Alan Stoke, both employees of the Twin Lakes Department of Public Works, were in the area and were listening to their radio when the crew requested to have the Lucas tool picked up from the first responding ambulance and delivered to our scene for possible use on this patient. They responded, and the timing could not have been better. The device arrived the minute we exited the residence with our patient. At this time, the patient was again reassessed and had lost his pulse again. And the device was placed, and the patient was moved and loaded into the ambulance for emergent transport to Integra McHenry. During our initial response to the resident, a paramedic interceptor was requested from Richmond Township Fire Rescue at their station. Shortly after loading the patient into the ambulance, the Phillips monitor analyzed the patient's cardiac rhythm and asked for a second shock to be delivered. The shock was then delivered. Several other procedures were completed during the transport by the crew prior to meeting Richmond's paramedics. The ambulance began transport and stopped along Highway 12 in Richmond, where paramedic Kevin Barnes and paramedic student Eric Schwind, is that pronounced right? Entered the ambulance. At this time, patient care was transferred to the paramedic in charge. Our driver, Jeremy Knoll, made the emergent transport safe and comfortable for the crew to do their jobs. Patient regained spontaneous circulation during transport, and the Lucas tool was stopped and removed. Care was transferred to the staff at Centegra Emergency Department upon arrival. Several other people were involved in the save and must be mentioned also. They are dispatcher Kathleen Zito from Twin Lakes Police Department, who did an outstanding job. Detective Joshua Cooper from Twin Lakes Police Department, Kevin Teets, EMT paramedic with Twin Lakes Fire and Rescue, and several of Mr. Sheedy's family members that were on scene and initiated early CPR. All calls initiated in Twin Lakes are completed using a team approach. This was a testament to that philosophy. Mr. Sheedy is here today with us because the system worked exactly as it is supposed to. And we have everyone to thank for giving Mr. Sheedy a second chance at life. We are so grateful to have been part of this survival story and wish Mr. Sheedy the best. I would like to take a moment to thank each of these involved and on behalf of the Twin Lakes Fire Department Rescue Squad, along with the dedication and support that we receive each and every day from our police department dispatchers and officers. Our paramedic intercept agreements with Richmond and other participating agencies continues to be a near perfect arrangement when we're responding to these calls. For this call, just for mention, we were dispatched at 13:43 hours, and he was in the hospital at 14:23. So we were well under our door to balloon mark as far as getting a critical patient in. And Cindy, if you would like, she will extend to you the hospital aspect of that.
My name is Cindy Amore, and many people here know me because I'm a member of the Twin Lakes Fire Department and Rescue Squad. But in my professional life, I'm a nurse for Centegra Hospital in McHenry, and my role is the EMS System Coordinator and the Community Training Center Coordinator for the American Heart Association. And it's in situations like this where both roles really meet, and you get to see something called the chain of survival really work, and you have incredible outcomes. This is testimony by you being here tonight. When the patient arrived, when Mr. Sheedy arrived at our ED in McHenry, he was evaluated, and one of the things that's kind of unique in the world we live in today is that a 12-lead EKG was performed, as you probably noticed, and they evaluated his rhythm and immediately put the cath lab on standby for a patient. A cardiologist was called in. Mr. Sheedy's time from the time first medical contact was acquired, which was, I believe, at 14:10 is the time I have on my form based on the sheet, which might have been when Richmond got on board, to the point of when his coronary blood vessel was reperfused was 104 minutes. In a full rest scenario, that's a really difficult situation because the patient is probably, as we all know, the most unstable you can have. And so the timing is critical, but more critical is the opportunity to really provide the right care to obtain return of spontaneous circulation and stabilize the patient so the patient can go to the cath lab. So all the way around, this is an incredible example of not only teamwork from the point of contact where the family recognizes the situation and initiates CPR. 911 is notified. The dispatcher helps to coordinate all those different services that are required to do the very best to provide the patient care. The EMS crew responds and has everything they need to be able to initiate care. In this case, the Lucas device, I think, is an interesting piece to the puzzle because we've seen improved outcomes with those continuous compression devices, and I think that's really testimony. We've had 2 of them now that have come into our emergency department within the last 3 or 4 months, and both patients had positive outcomes, which only reinforces the use of that particular device. But to continue on, being an intermediate or an IV tech service, being able to access paramedic intercept for the additional components of the resuscitation, primarily the drugs that we need to help sustain that return of spontaneous circulation, and to have the patient arrive with pulses in the emergency department is a huge piece. Didn't stop there. The cath lab, the intensive care staff, the rehab afterwards is kind of where the whole continuum goes. So it's really a pleasure to meet you here, Mr. Sheedy. Dr. Piccini, our medical director, unfortunately is working in the emergency department tonight, probably hoping for other great outcomes like yours, and couldn't be here. But on behalf of Centegra and the emergency department staff, the cardiology staff, and the nursing staff beyond, we'd like to congratulate you for being able to be here with us. And it's truly rewarding to see that. I have some certificates for some of the members involved. I don't know how you want to do that, Gerald.
Well, I think what I'm going to do, if it's all right, is I'm going to call each of them up
Okay.
and give them their save pin where I can, just so some understand. We ordered the save pins, but they weren't able to come here in time. So I've talked to those individuals that won't get their pins tonight, but when they come in on the 16th, I'll make sure that they do get them. Those that actually use the Lucas tool, Lucas has sent some certificates for those people, so I will give them along with your save pin. So the first one would be Chief Stankhouse. Yep. And when we get them, we'll just get a picture with everybody. Assistant Chief Al Stope. Kevin Teets, EMT paramedic. Jeremy Knoll, our driver extraordinaire. I don't know if I gave you the wrong thing, but I can. Ed Combs, EMT. Captain Andy Hassen. Andy is an ID Tech with us, I'm sorry. Lieutenant.
You just got a promotion, it's pretty
Got
awesome.
promoted and everything, all in one night. And,
I'd like to start, if we could, with kind of from the beginning. So I'd like to start with Kathy Zito. On behalf of Centegra, as a community training center, I have a certificate for you as well. Congratulations, thanks. And then the two officers, Officer Francis and Officer Sanders.
good.
Thank you very much. And then the Twin Lakes responding crew. Took a long time to sort all these certificates. I know, I need to know. We'll start with Chief Daryl Stone.
Well, thank you.
Lieutenant Hazy.
You got demoted
Up and down all in one night.
Easy come, easy
Right.
go, Andy. Congratulations. Ed Combs. It's a long one.
It is. You gotta be tough.
Go ahead. And then if I could have Jeremy come up as the outstanding driver, which we all know, no matter what you do on the scene, if you don't arrive at the hospital safely, it doesn't matter. And then I'd like to thank those EMS responders who came to the scene to help support, to make sure they had enough help. Certainly bringing the Lucas device was important, so if I could have Chief Klaus and Assistant Chief Stoll come up, please. Oops. You are welcome. And last but certainly not least, Kevin Teets, who heard the call going on and wanted to make sure they had enough help. Sometimes in a situation like that,
And the last two that I didn't want to forget are our two paramedics. You can both come up at the same time, Kevin and Art.
Oh,
There you go. Okay, absolutely, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so I have a certificate here for Lieutenant Barnes. And Eric had the opportunity to just graduate from paramedic class about 2 weeks after this event came on. So I think he wants to thank you for giving me an awesome experience. And it's an incredible way to start your career. So Eric, congratulations.
And I believe that concludes our first SAVE presentation, and then we'll go right into the second if that's